Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you weren't with us last week, I am now aboard the starship Fibonacci.
That would be me.
Yes, and currently we're hiding out in a cave inside of a giant asteroid to avoid detection by some space bandits.
I'm going to reiterate that I think this is a bad idea.
Would you say that you have a bad feeling about this?
I don't have feelings.
Okay then, moving on. Rula 3RDS. Who is our guest on the podcast this week?
Jeremy Harris.
Yes, I'll be speaking with my friend Jeremy Harris, who has a penchant for photographing abandoned spaces, about whether photographers should be out and about taking pictures during the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll be right back with that discussion after this short break.
Yar, what is it, matey?
I hate paying these stupid subscription fees to Adobe for Photoshop and Lightroom.
Ye be wanting software that ye can be downloading and owning
Yar!
that allows ye to manage your library of photos, like Lightroom, yet also enhance ye photos, like Photoshop.
Yar!
What have I told ye? That such software exists, and is cheaper than paying for a subscription to Photoshop and Lightroom for just 1 year.
I'd say you be crazy.
Well, I not be crazy. Ye should check out Luminar.
Luminar?
Yes, Luminar. It has libraries that allow you to manage ye catalog of photos, tag and organize your pictures. Then you can enhance your photos, smooth skin, remove unwanted objects, apply presets, even replace the sky using Luminar 4's AI engine.
Whoa!
Yes, it be impressive. Yet, ye can even use it as a standalone program or as a plugin for Photoshop or Lightroom to take your photo editing to the next level.
Do I need a map to find it?
Nay, ye can get thee to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar.
Where they be?
nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/LUMINAR.
Arr!
Yar. Yeah, yar.
Yar, yar, yar.
Yar.
Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am here today with my friend and photographer, Jeremy Harris. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hello,
Thanks
how are you doing? Doing good?
I think we're all hanging in there, considering what's going on in the world. Thanks for coming back, returning the returning guest
Oh yeah, no
on the
problem.
podcast. How are you holding up during the pandemic? You're in Tennessee now? Are you in full lockdown there, or what's the deal?
We're in Nashville, Tennessee. We are a Republican state, so our mayor has not completely done a full lockdown, but most of the shops are closed. The restaurants are closed for the most part. People are still out and about doing certain things, but for the most part, most people are staying home.
Okay. Yeah, here where I am in New Jersey, we are on lockdown in that it's essential businesses only. So I have a question for you. You are a person, if people who've listened to the previous episode of the podcast you're on, you like to go places and photograph abandoned buildings and
Yes.
structures. And now, like, the whole world is kind of abandoned at the moment.
I guess you can look at it like that, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there are like wildlife is returning to places where they're normally like not. Like,
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Crazy. Like there are like coyotes and stuff like going into New York City. It's weird. But have you been going out and taking pictures?
I did. When they finally shut down Broadway, which is our main tourist area in Nashville, they shut it down. I took a bike ride down there one day to photograph, and because it's never empty. But that is really the only part of Nashville that I think is iconic. So I haven't really been going too many other places because they're just not very visually interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there was some there was some discussions. People were like, "Oh, gonna go into the city and like take pictures of like abandoned Times Square?" And I'm like, I'm not going to personally. Like, I just feel like, but I know people who are, and I think that that's, as long as you're not putting yourself or somebody else at risk. The reason I'm not going is because I have people living in my house who are have respiratory issues, so I just don't want to take the risk of picking it up somewhere and bringing it back.
Well, there are plenty of people who can go out there and do it, so it's not like you're the only one. Like, we're depending on you to go out and document this thing for us.
Right, and I think that that's like, I have a friend who like took video and like photos of like Times Square like totally empty. And it's sort of haunting. Anybody who's ever been there on a regular basis, anybody who's ever been to Times Square or like Grand Central or anything like that, when it's in its normal state of chaos and hundreds, if not thousands of people, swarming around, it's bizarre to see it empty. Like, no one there.
Wow. Yeah, I'd like to actually see that.
I'll share the video with you. It's I don't know. It's haunting.
Was it the black and white one that was set to? Well, there was one that somebody did that was set to a song by Disturbed. It was like a cover of Simon and Garfunkel, but it was done by Disturbed, and it was it was actually a pretty good rendition of that song. But it was done in black and white, and it was all just like video footage of various places in New York with like nobody around. It was
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to look for that. But it's just weird. It's just seeing, like, having lived there for 20 years, it's just sort of like, wow, that's like knowing that that's up there. And I think that is an essential. I mean, photographers going out and documenting this and what's happening is an important thing. Like, this is a moment in world history, and we need to document that. That being said, I think that people need to take the proper precautions that they're protecting themselves and other people. I just see, like, for example, like I said, we're like shut down except for essential businesses. And they've shut down the parks around us. Like, I, need to walk my dog. Otherwise she goes insane because she's super, super high energy. And I used to go to the park, and just like walk. There's a 1.5 mile loop. I just walk her around the park. And the other day, the police rolled up on us and were like, "You have to exit the park."
Oh, wow. Okay. So you can't even go into the park.
There was nobody within 100 yards of me. And I was just like, okay, now I can only walk her on the sidewalk or in the street. And it's like, this dog is going to drive me insane if I don't give her enough energy, give her enough exercise. But it's like, those sorts of things are like that, I was wearing a mask, it's not like I was, I was taking precautions. And like, that sort of gets me like, if there's space to avoid people and you are avoiding them, I think you can be out there. That would be my personal thoughts. Yeah. But I'm abiding by the rules because that's what keeps other people safe. Because I know, and the reason why I know is that the park, like, why they were getting so serious about coming to the park and actually like telling people to leave, was because somebody who lives right next to the park complained because their kids couldn't use the playground equipment.
That's why you shut down. That's why they shut down the whole park.
Well, technically, the parks were closed, quote unquote closed. But like, people were going and like keeping way away from each other and just walking because they needed to go out and like walk and get out of their houses and whatever. But somebody apparently, because I saw it on a local Facebook group, somebody complained that how come people are out there walking and my kids can't use the playground equipment? It's like, well, the playground equipment is something that you're touching and other people could have touched. And it lives on the surface for however long. And, but yeah, but that's my concern with photography. To relate that to photography is, you say that, people should be going out there and documenting things, but I think there's also this gray area of once you allow that door open, you let the idiots in too. The people who don't really consider other people.
Well, yeah, but how many photographers are going to be out and about taking pictures during any particular day?
I'm just saying, one of the things that I was thinking about, there was I'm still on all the New York City photo forums. I don't know if you're still part of any of them.
I am, yeah.
But some of them were seeing those empty Times Square and empty Grand Central, and there'd be responses were pretty much divided between, hey, that's a great picture, and you shouldn't be out there. You're taking public transportation. MTA workers are dying. There's, it's hard to keep those subways and stuff clean. If you're taking public transit, you're putting yourself at risk. You're potentially putting other people at risk because you're touching stuff. Because it's not like you're just walking there. People are going from Brooklyn to Grand Central.
Yeah.
You're riding the subway. You have to touch something in the subway car while you're there. It's just, I see what their point of saying you're technically, I would try to stay within whatever you can walk. That's honestly for me, or a bike in the city, in New York City, or if you got a car and you can drive there and you can keep yourself isolated. I mean, that would be my personal thing on it.
Oh, I wouldn't be taking the subway.
Yeah. I don't like taking the subway under normal circumstances.
No, not at all.
And I'm sure where you are, where I am, I have to take the car to get places. I'm sure that's, what you're doing too, or biking, or
yeah. I rarely drive anywhere anymore, unless I have to go to the grocery store. But there's a park nearby. It's an old abandoned airfield that they turned into sort of a park, and people still go down there and ride the loop of the old landing strip, which is a mile loop. They got they got the takeoff side and they got the landing side, and then it curves around. Perfect for riding bikes. And there are people out there. So far, they haven't shut that down, thankfully, because I go down there and ride laps in the morning. There are people who wear masks outside. The other day when I was down there riding, there was a lot of people down there, so I was wearing a mask because I was reading about how even when you pass somebody who's exercising, especially if they're
breathing heavy.
Exercising, they're breathing heavy, and if somebody's in front of you on a bicycle, they might cough or sneeze or just and I'm I'm not taking a chance.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. You're putting yourself in harm's way, and by getting that close to people, and just if you're biking, I saw this guy on a bike. There were 3 couples all walking on the sidewalk, and 20 feet away from each other, and this guy comes flying down the sidewalk behind them and overtakes all 3 couples, almost pushing them off the sidewalk on his bike. And it's dude, first of all, you should be in the street. Second, what a dick move. You've just contaminated all three of these people because he was not wearing a mask. They were all wearing masks, walking where they were going, but he wasn't. But it brings up, another thing. You posted this morning a story of the people protesting in Ohio. The photographer who had taken the picture of the protest, the people pressed against the door.
Joshua Bickle.
Yeah, the all pressed against the door, and those comparisons to zombie movies, and he was talking about how we don't know what these people are going through, and stop calling them zombies. I think that it's one thing to protest and say hey, I don't agree with what's going on here. It's another thing to again flout the safety of others because they're all just standing right next to each other with no masks on.
Well, that was a case where he was out doing his job.
Yeah, he was doing his job. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think the protesters were taking their lives into their own hands. He was, the article that I posted was very objective, and it looked at their side as well as his side or our side, and the fact that yes, they do have a right to protest, and yes, they are upset that their governor is making them stay home and they're not able to work, and that they think, oh, because we're landscapers and we do things outside, we can keep distance, we should still be able to work. It's a good point. But them protesting and getting in the street and potentially spreading this virus around is not a smart thing to do. I disagree.
Yeah, but, and a similar thing happened in my home state of Michigan, where people were protesting, and it's like they're all standing around each other, most of them not wearing masks, and they're all like clumped up together. They're not keeping any sort of distance from one another, and it's like some of the things they're saying make me cringe, but it's also just the fact that like, okay, you're not even concerned about your own safety or anybody else's safety here because you think this is not a big deal. So that becomes problematic, especially for like, again, you talk about the photographer taking the picture of the people in Ohio. What about the news crews covering this protest in Michigan, or there was one in Texas? They're going out there to try to cover this, and I'm sure they're trying to keep themselves safe. They're doing their job of documenting this, but like then you've got those people in Michigan, like while there were a certain number of them outside their cars protesting on the steps of the Capitol building, there were also a whole bunch of people in cars. They were in their cars causing, it was an Operation Gridlock, like slowing down everything around there. They blocked the entrance to a hospital, the ambulance entrance.
Yeah.
So there was an ambulances trying to get in with people in their ambulances, and they're blocked off because these people wanted to protest and, say that we should be able to go outside. Yeah.
Well, that's just ignorance.
Yeah, but that's like, but when we're talking about like photographers, and I would hope that most photographers are smart enough to take precautions.
Yeah.
But then again, I ran into it this morning or last night in a Facebook forum for photographers, people saying like, it's my constitutional right to go out and work. I should be able to go out and do what I want. And, this isn't a big deal. And, you guys are all overreacting. I don't even know anybody who has this, it's thinking that they know better than everyone else. There are those people still in the photography community, who will go out and do whatever they feel like doing because they think they know better than anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, are the people that are going out, are they taking precautions? And I mean, in New York City, do people wear masks on the street? I know I saw an article in Queens where it's so dense full of people that when people went out on the street, most people are wearing masks. Like
it's mandatory now.
It's mandatory. Okay.
In New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, they're kind of like, they've kind of formed a coalition, and New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have all said like you have to be wearing a mask if you go out. Especially in the city. I mean, like here where I'm at in the suburbs, I mean, it's pretty mixed. It depends on where you're going. If you go to the grocery store, everyone is wearing a mask. They won't let you in without a mask on.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yeah, masks are pretty prevalent here, but it's also like, people who were telling me that, in the photography forums were saying, I'm in Texas and I don't even know anybody who has this, let alone somebody who's died. So I shouldn't have to stay home.
Well, yeah, but that's a ridiculous way of thinking because Texas is a huge state.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, it doesn't have the number of people in a small amount of space like New York does, or like San Francisco
but also,
does.
Yes, and the thing is, I agree. Like, you have spread out space, but when you talk about going and photographing a wedding or having a wedding, this is what they were discussing was like, should we be allowed to be able to go and people should be allowed to have weddings, and we should be allowed to go and photograph them. And I was saying like, well, you're talking about getting a group of people together. And then dispersing all of them all over the place to like then go and possibly infect a bunch of other people. Because all it takes is one person at that event to have, to have it, and then all of a sudden everybody's got it. I don't know. So this leads me to another topic that's related with photographers. I don't know. Do you know anybody near you who's doing porch portraits?
No, I don't know any photographers now who are working I have one friend in San Francisco who mentioned to me that he was on set last weekend, and I don't know exactly what that meant or what he was doing, but every other photographer I know in California and in Nashville and in New York, nobody is doing anything.
Okay, so I mean, I saw like when this started coming out, I saw one, I think it was CBS or NBC, like nightly news, like piece. They ran like a 1 minute like human interest feature on this photographer in Minnesota or Wisconsin who is doing what he was calling porch portraits. Like people stand on their porch. I come by your house. I take pictures, whatever. And then a couple days later, I saw another one on another network, and I'm like, okay, this is becoming a thing. And people were asking in my neighborhood, like, oh, are you doing this? And I was like, we're locked down. Like, it's essential businesses only, and photography is not an essential business. So, like, I don't, like, there's the potential to pick up a $500 fine.
Yeah.
For, being out and when you're not an essential business, but yeah, it's the people who continue to do it, and they're like, I need to make money. You have to consider the risks.
Well, yeah. I mean, if I were to get hired to do a portrait of somebody and it was outside and it was just the two of us, I could use my 70 to 200 and it would be perfectly fine.
Yeah, I think that there's, if you can control the situation, I think, and it's interesting because actually the Canadian, like some Canadian Photography Association released a letter telling people not to do this. Like telling people not to be doing these porch portrait sessions. It's, they got it right here. Quote says, I understand that photographers are suddenly cut off from most, quote unquote, in real life social contact and thus their clients, but this type of photography is not a necessary interaction, nor is it an essential service. Although most people are doing it with the very best of intentions, some photographers may go and knock on the door or ring the doorbell or pass someone on the sidewalk. A child could run over and hug them without thinking about it. Or a built-in photographer instinct could be to go over and fix a client's hair or pose the client, and it could easily turn into a problem.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think that, like I'm not doing them because, like I said, we're not an essential business. If you, I don't know, you have to, there's so many factors that I feel like can't be controlled. I agree with you. If you were like in a field
yeah.
and you could be like 30 feet away from people and, you travel separately and whatever, I personally don't see that as a problem. I think once you're dealing with children or like, when you have close suburban areas where like, anybody could be trying to leave their house or whatever, it's just you're right next to each other. It just becomes an issue, I think.
Yeah, it's not a good idea. I mean, some people are really paranoid about it. They're outside walking down the street with nobody around them wearing masks. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's, I had to like actually like stop and yell at a kid that came running at me to like want to pet my dog. And like we were walking and this little girl was with her mom and they were on the, opposite side of the street. This was a couple weeks ago. But like she just looked at the dog and was like, puppy. And she's like 6 or 7 years old and just like started running at us. And I was like, hey, stop. You have to stop right there. You can't come over and like, hey, it's not good to do that to somebody's dog in the first place.
Yeah.
But, but now we're in a whole other set of circumstances.
It's funny that you bring that up because like touching pets, like there's a cat that comes out to greet me whenever I walk down to the park with my bike. And I was reaching out to pet it the other day and I was like looking around for the owner because I was thinking maybe the owner would get upset that I was going to pet its cat and then the cat would bring the virus into the house. And I was like, well, that's a good possibility that could actually happen.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, I can't pet like neighborhood cats anymore.
Yeah. It's, one of the first things they did here was they closed the dog parks.
Yeah.
And it's in like, I have a dog park crew. Like 15 people that we regularly go to the dog park at the same time every day. And I texted them all in our text chain and said, hey, just letting everybody know the dog park is locked up. It's like chained closed. So just don't bother going there anymore. And half of them responded like, oh, that makes sense. And the other half were like, why would they do that? There's been a lot of dogs can't catch it, as far as we know. They can't catch it. It doesn't seem like it, but you should consider them a surface. Animals are a surface. If you pet an animal or an animal licks your hand, like licks a person's hand and it gets in their mouth, and then what? Dogs, especially cats, kind of, but like dogs especially, they're gonna lick your hand and they're gonna lick your face.
Yeah.
So that's two places that you don't want this stuff possibly getting on. It's your hands and your face.
Man, that's a huge bummer because I like petting people's animals. I was actually
Me too.
I was just over at a friend's house yesterday. We were keeping distance, but I was petting his dogs. He didn't seem to think anything about it, and I was like, oh well, I don't know. It's a hard thing, man, because like when we're all trying to stay socially distant from each other, and it's very difficult for me because I'm a handshaker and a hugger, and I like to be close to people. But then when you've got friends that you have been home for a month or longer, and I've been home for a month or longer, and I can say, not with 100% certainty that I don't have it, and neither can he, but at the same time, we're both not showing any symptoms, and we're like, okay, well, I can risk petting your dog, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, those are things like if you haven't been out, like there's other things like if you've gone out, like we try to keep our like calendar as far as like how long has it been since the last time we went to the store. Like I always try to like keep a sense of like, okay, like if I haven't been to the store in a week or whatever and I'm feeling okay, I would probably feel all right if people wanted to like come like to our porch and stay, 10, 15 feet away or whatever. But like, I just, I think that you're right. If that people have been keeping themselves isolated. Yeah. Taking some precautions is...
Well, so what do you think about, this is not photography oriented necessarily, but
that's totally fine.
There was somebody who was cracking down online about, because my personal opinion, if I were in New York City and there was tons of people everywhere, I would not be going out. But that being said, I'm not. I'm in Nashville. I live in a cul-de-sac. My neighbors, we can come out and we can stand 8 to 12 feet apart, and we can have a conversation and drink our beers and, sit in our lawn chairs or whatever and hang out in the sun. But I've seen like posts going around where people are like jumping all over and they called them the dads, because you'll see a picture out of a window and in the alley behind the house, there's like 6 or 8 guys in a circle, like hanging out a few feet apart. And it's like, sure, if one of those guys sneezes or coughs, then it's not a good idea. But I guess my point is I think it's perfectly fine to hang out with people within a certain, when you're in a certain radiance from them and that they're not sick.
Right. I'm okay with that. This is a related thing. Like there's, they've closed down all the golf courses supposedly here. And though I still see people out, on the golf course. I don't know if they're private courses or not. I don't know what the deal is, like what's going on there, but I still see and people are like, I wish I could go golfing. I want to go golfing. And I'm like, I think that going golfing would be fine as long as you're not in a golf cart with people. Like you're not sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody and, you stay away from one another. That I honestly, stay like 20 feet away from the other person. I think that's fine. I think that would be fine. But then like somebody said, what if it's my friend who, my close friend, and I believe that I should be able to ride in the cart with them. I'm like, do you trust your friend with your life? Like it's like what your explanation is not that they've been isolated as well. It's just that they're my friend. And
Yeah.
I should be able to hang out with them like in the golf cart. Like, why the hell do you guys need a cart? Like, just walk.
Yeah, exactly.
Get some exercise. Get some exercise. Get out there. Like, do something. Or limit people like one person in a cart. I don't know. Do something.
Yeah. It's the tough one, man. I don't know how we're gonna start getting back to some sort of, like when they say we're gonna get the country going again. How is that gonna work? Like, how are we gonna get back to work? Like, if my clients called me up and say, okay, we want to do some portraits, some headshots in the office. Like, I have one client who's like, I'm going into their doctor's office, to a dentist's office, and I'm photographing. I'm doing headshots, and I'm doing sort of behind the scenes stuff of them working, and then some group shots of the people in the team. If they called me up and they said, all right, we want to do this, whether or not I feel like I'm comfortable enough doing it, I mean, what am I going to do? Am I going to say no to the job? Or am I just going to say, okay, well, we're going to have to talk about this. And like, is everybody sure they're not sick?
Yes.
And is everybody going to be okay with me coming in there and not shaking your hand and staying a certain amount of, feet away from you? I think that's the way it's going to have to be. People are just going to have to understand. And when is it going to be safe to be able to do that? Like, when are we going to all feel comfortable gathering in a small office building or in an office, coming in and doing headshots and things like that, like that's my bread and butter right there. So when is that going to get back? When are we going to be doing that again?
I think that's like, well, my personal opinion is that we only start getting back to some sense of normalcy when we have a couple of things. If there's a vaccine. There's a vaccine, then we can slowly, as we start rolling that out, then, we can start getting people, in larger numbers back to work. Or if we develop like the antibody test, we can prove that people have had it. They can go back to work or whatever. Like, if we can find out that, but we need more testing in that regards, because we're seeing people who have tested negative, who were sick and then tested negative, and then weeks later are testing positive again. Yeah. And they're not sure if they're getting reinfected or if it's just still active from the first time or what's going on. So, I mean, like, that's like, we need to figure that stuff out first. But if you have a vaccine, good. If you have a sense that people are actually developing an immunity to it, and we can detect who those people are, then we can start letting those people like slowly back into the workforce or into like a more normal life set. If we develop some sort of treatment for the actual disease as opposed to just treating the symptoms, which is what we're doing now, then I think that, between that and if we have rapid testing to find out if somebody's got it. Yeah. Like, so you can like test somebody and then figure out where they got it from, and contact tracing. Those are all things that, will help move us forward towards a, more back to normal sort of thing. But I think what you're talking about, like, in that sort of situation, and, I'm sort of like still looking at, I've got weddings that have now been moved to October and November and December, from the spring and summer, and, it's still looking at it and kind of going like, is this really still is this going to be safe in October, for me to be in a big group of people?
And think about the people who are throwing the weddings. Are they going to still put on these weddings, having their family travel and congregate? And, I feel for those people who have booked a wedding a year down the road, not having any idea this was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, like, I dealt with it like when it was starting to come up in February. I started raising issues with questions with my clients who were getting married in March and April. I said, this is something to start thinking about. And they're like, oh, well, we don't know yet. And I was like, no, you should really start thinking about it. Like, start having this conversation with your families, because it's going to get to the point in the first couple I had who was getting married in March. they were starting to just like shut things down in other places, and like, in other countries we're getting locked down. And I was like, how's it going? And then they were like, we've had like half of our guest list has said we're not coming.
Yeah.
Because the wedding's in New York, and New York is becoming like, the wedding was in Queens, which has like the highest infection rate in the country right now. And they were just like, we're not doing this. We're not going to do it. And, moving the wedding back, 7 months. But I'm still sitting here going like, is it going to be okay in 7 months? I feel like what you're talking about is going to be a lot easier to do than a wedding.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and because that's like we said, what I said when we were starting this whole interview was that what factors can you control, and if you're just doing headshots, you can control a lot more. Of those factors and possible interactions and physical contact. You can control that way better than a wedding, which is the joy of weddings, man. But we'll see. Any final thoughts?
So you booked weddings for this year, and I assumed you got deposits.
Yeah.
Has anybody canceled the weddings, or do you have any? Are they just sort of waiting to see what's going to happen?
No one that I have worked with or who has booked with me has canceled. They've all postponed or rescheduled. Yeah. They've all said, it's going to take place on another date. Now, have they all set dates? Not yet. Like, some of them are like still waiting to see how this is going to shake out, and they're thinking they're moving possibly to 2021. Yeah. So, the other people, like the early people, and the March and April people, all in May, all pushed back to October and November, and December. And then, like, I have some other people who I've been in touch with who were like thinking about booking, for the latter half of the year, who were looking at, December and, January and February of next year, who've all said like, we're going to put this on hold. We're just going to wait and see what happens, in a few months. And then we'll get back to this and see if we want to even stay with our original date. So, yeah, it's a lot of stuff is up in the air. It's a lot of that's up in the air. But nobody that I know of has canceled. Yeah. But it's like, I'm saying nobody that I work with. I do know of people who had cancellations. I don't know if you remember Sasha, the wedding photographer in New York. He's the guy who got the picture of Zach Braff, like photobombing a couple in Times Square. A couple years ago. He was mentioning in one of the New York forums that the day that the travel ban was put in, like, that the U.S. was like not allowing people in from other countries, from Europe, he lost 15 weddings in the next month, because he does a lot of like people coming over from Europe, getting married in the city, and like, elopements in New York City. And he was like, yeah, I lost 15 weddings over the next 30 days. Like, they're canceled. They're done. They're not coming.
Well, that's why you get a deposit.
Right. And there's a whole discussion about, all over the place. Like, do you give the money back? Do you it depends. I've always said, if I can rebook the date, I will consider giving you a deposit or portion of it back. Yeah. But, there's also like, I have...
Well... What does it say on your contract? It's something about, I mean, not yours particularly, but like if your wedding is canceled due to an act of God or something.
Force majeure. I am not in control. I'm not in control.
This is exactly what that is.
Yeah. And take the moment to pimp it. But like, if people don't have that, like Nerdy Photographer has contract templates that include both a force majeure clause and a postponement cancellation clause, because I've dealt with, between Hurricane Sandy and 9/11 and, all other stuff that I've done. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years. Yeah. Things come up. And things happen. Yeah, things happen.
Nature happens.
That are outside of your control. And as a photographer, you got to be prepared.
Yeah.
You got to have it in your contract.
This is a big one. This is
This is really big.
This is the force majeure of all force majeures.
Yeah, and I think that's also the problem, like, that we're seeing is like we're sort of used to natural catastrophes that sort of like happen and then they're done.
Yeah.
This is just going on and on and on. Like,
well, you better start listening, 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 better start listening.
hey, F2.0, why don't you tell the audience what time it is?
And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Hey, Rula 3RDS, what's the topic for useless information this week?
Jimmy Carter.
Jeremy, did you know that Jimmy Carter was the first U.S. president to be born in a hospital?
I had no idea.
When you think about it, then you're like, oh yeah, all those guys, like, hospitals weren't really that common back when all of those people were being born.
Yeah.
Instead of a...
That's true. I never thought about it, but it's a good point.
Yeah, it's like all those people were, Truman and Eisenhower and all those people. And
Born at home.
Born at home. Doing a lot more things at home these days.
Yeah. It's just true. Well, I feel for those people who live in New York who have those small, like, cramped little apartments, I'm lucky that I live in a pretty big size house, and I can have my own space, and we got a yard, and we can get out and do things.
Yeah, I mean, I've been coming up with projects for myself to do, like, both photographically and, just around the house, just to keep myself busy, because otherwise my anxiety sort of takes over.
Well, you better start listening, better start listening, better start listening, better start listening, better start listening.
I'd like to thank my friend Jeremy Harris for being on the podcast. And it appears that the cave we were hiding in is actually some sort of giant space worm.
I told you this was a bad idea.
Yeah, I heard you the first dozen times. Why don't you read the credits while I get us ready to get out of here?
Fine. You can learn more about our guest, Jeremy Harris, at his website, jeremyharris.com. Rula 3RDS was played by Jen Clark. Jen also played Luna, the Luminar pirate, in the ad at the beginning of the show. Jen is a regular at Go Comedy, where she performs with such groups as Cougar Den, JK, Snafu, and Magna Carta. Be sure to subscribe to the Nerdy Photographer podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get podcasts, and leave a review. Also follow us on Instagram at @TheNerdyPhoto.
Speaking of Apple Podcasts, did you know that we're ranked in the top 200 photography podcasts on Apple Podcasts?
I was unaware.
Okay, time to get moving. Buckle up, everybody. I saw this in a cartoon once. To everyone listening, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.